back to that window. There we go. So we have two people on. I could say hello if you're someone who likes to communicate. And let's talk shop. I actually have my old games over here. So that's the original Ultramodern. The original Ultramodern was released, I think, in 2017, probably 2016. And it came right on the heels of the release of this book. And this is the Amethyst Quintessence. So in 2014, late 2014, we started up a Kickstarter for Amethyst. Amethyst was originally, I have all my books here. I have a painting collection here. I'm painting some models. But the first Amethyst was this thing. This was the first Amethyst that we ever made. It was not a Kickstarter, but it was simply self-published. And this is a limited edition print run of the physical hardcover. We had some soft covers. And of course, you can get it on print on demand and digital from Drive-Thru. So this one's showing its age because it's about 12 years old now. And it is definitely shows, it's reflective of the time period. And it was done on Microsoft Word, right? And it started off as a homebrew setting, very fine print. Started off as a homebrew setting in 2000, and we slowly scaled up the production. And then in 2007, I went and I tried to do it to publish it officially. And around that same time period, it was as a homebrew setting. I was just asking artists to use their artwork, and that was kind of cool. A lot of the artists I asked said yes. Most of them are surprised I was even asked. And one of those people I asked was Nick Greenwood, who was one of the few people that I approached to do official artwork, and he was one of the few that actually did black and white, which is what we needed because we couldn't afford color, and we also couldn't afford to print the book in color. So Nick ended up coming on board and doing all his artwork. Now, it wasn't all of the artwork, mind you. Put that back there. It wasn't all the artwork. There was some illustrations done by a few other people. This cover, for example, is done by Jamie Jones. Jamie Jones is incredibly well known today. When I knew him, he was just in college. And after this, he started working for Wizards of the Coast, did work for Magic the Gathering. He drew a lot of stuff for Magic. Then he went over to Bungie, worked on Halo, and now he's working on Destiny. So he's definitely risen up. And so he did a couple illustrations. Catherine Ginger did a few illustrations, and Desmond Ing. And that was that first book. Now, this was on the shelf for 1 month before 4th edition got released. So we decided, hey, why don't we just support 4th edition? And we did. And he came out with this one. I got more people on the stream. Come and say hi, ask questions. I don't want to ramble on forever. So this is the re-release. So this is Amethyst Foundation. This is the 4th edition book of Amethyst that came out in 2010. This one was actually published by Goodman Games. So our label's on the back, not the front. And it was 4th edition, so we got to have our GSL. Now, it was and a lot of the artwork carried over. We added only a few new illustrations from the original D20 book right there. And that was released in 2010. By then, the writing was on the wall for a lot of 4th edition stuff, so it didn't do as solidly as people were expecting. So we ended up following it up with this book here. So this is Amethyst Evolution. Now, Amethyst Evolution is the first book that we developed on our own label for 4th edition, and it was an expansion for Foundations. And it added a few more illustrations, but it was primarily designed to be an expansion to add more content. And I wouldn't say fix some of the issues with Foundations, but definitely address some of the evolving evolution. But it was after Evolution that we decided to release Ultramodern 4. Now, this is the first attempt to do a D20 modern for D&D that Dungeons & Dragons weren't producing. Hey, everyone. And this one is the first attempt to create completely universal rules for D&D that's not being done by D&D. So because D20 Modern was the original 3.0 book, I don't think they ever made a 3.5 version. And that was basically what we did. And I wanted to show people that you could do sci-fi modern rules with 4th edition, which a lot of people said you couldn't do. So that's when I first introduced Ladders. And this is when we first saw all of Nick's wonderful illustration he did with William Miller and so forth. Now this did well. It actually did as well, if not better, than Evolution. And it did quite well for itself. Oh yeah, so Nick is actually in the comments. So if you have any direct questions for Nick, he's actually following in the comments. You can say hi, Nick, if you want. Say hello. So that came first. Now this was supposed to be a much larger book because it was originally a cyberpunk book. That cyberpunk book was Neurospasta. So I'm going to say something here. Okay, let's get things going here. So I'm not seeing any messages from everyone, so I'm hoping that the chat is working. But anyway, so Neurospasta was originally supposed to be part of Ultramodern. Hey, Nick Reed's there, so there people are watching. Good. So that was originally supposed to be the book, and I cut them in half, and turned out to be pretty popular. So Neurospasta was the cyberpunk element. So it has a lot, once again, mostly black and white illustrations, and that's what we had there. And that's basically where things stood. And then later on, to put a nail in the coffin for 4th edition, I came out with Apex. And now people are starting to talk. Cool. So that was Apex, and this was me trying to do superheroes for 4th edition, and it ended up proving pretty successful. Now, that moves us into the Kickstarter, which we started in 2014. Hey, Rod. Hello, Cristiano. And that's when we decided to do Amethyst in full color. And we were going to support multiple systems, 5th edition, 4th edition, Pathfinder, 13th Age, Fate, and Savage World. Now, my editor, Christopher Stilson, he decided that he offered to do Fate and Savage World because I didn't know how to do it. I knew how to do 13th Age, and I was going to do the 4th edition and 5th edition versions. At the time, not a lot of people believed that 5th edition was going to go OGL. I did know it, and this has been a very common thing some people knew about, the fact that it was kind of in the news that Deus Ex Machina, my company, knew that D&D was going to go OGL months before everyone else did. That's because I had a conversation with Mike Merles where he basically spelled out everything. I think the reason why I had gotten into the inner circle for Wizards of the Coast was because I had supported 4th edition for so long and was one of the big supporters, and I guess they appreciated that loyalty. And they told me some of their future. So I knew that 5th edition was going to go OGL. So when I announced my campaign, a lot of people didn't believe I could support 5th edition. So yeah, we were probably one of the first 5th edition Kickstarters out there. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if we were the very first 5th edition Kickstarter to ever get launched. We made $10,000, but it proved to be a real nightmare, primarily because the book system, if you want to write for multiple systems, at least for me, I have to deprogram and kind of decompile one system to load up the other. So it took a really long time to put out the core books and then this new book faction. So because this Kickstarter was not one book, it was like I think it was like 12 books altogether. So when you get the core books, we released it. So we did a Pathfinder version called Renaissance. So this is the new version of the core Amethyst book. And now we had full color illustrations. So all those old illustrations got redone in full color. So these are all this amazing artwork. So that's Renaissance, but that wasn't the only one, right? Because we also got the, if you wanted to play with Fate, you would use Amethyst Destiny. And then another stupid thing that we did, which I don't suggest anyone ever do, is that we rebuilt the layout for each system so to kind of match the philosophy. So the artwork was in different spots, the layout was different, and so we basically had to rebuild the layout of each and every book. So this ended up taking like 2.5, 3 years. until finally we released Amethyst Quintessence, which I already showed off. And that one was the first time where we actually created this this color backdrop, and we were just getting a lot better with our layout. And so I did what I knew it was kind of the natural evolution, and that is to take the sci-fi modern rules out of here and make Ultramodern as we know it. And I don't think I have an Ultramodern within reach of Ultramodern 5. I don't think I have an Ultramodern 4. But I don't think I have an Ultramodern 5. My fiance is looking at me. I don't have an Ultramodern 5 in reach. Let's see here. Nope. I will find someone. We'll get brush. I think my lovely assistant will grab one for me. Thank you. So that was Ultramodern 5. So that got released in 2016. And like I said, it was released more as an afterthought, and this thing bloody exploded. Got to copper in a day, got to silver in 2, got to platinum in 3 months. It was and still is the only platinum title that we released. It was the second 5th edition title to hit platinum, the first being Middle-earth role-playing. And I think I'm still only one of a handful of third-party 5th edition books that have achieved platinum with Ultramodern 5. But I was not expecting that to be that successful. In fact, we were on vacation when it launched. And so we ended up releasing a few other expansions. We released Neurospasta. Yeah, I know exactly, Jeffrey. It was the hit was an afterthought. Amethyst was always like creating worlds. I love it as much as yeah. It's I think it's about the same size. Let's see if I can find. Oh, there we go. So when we look at Ultramodern 4 to Ultramodern 5, they're about the same size. I think they're about 242 and 50 pages. I think it's because Ultramodern 4, because classes are so much bigger with Ultramodern 4, because got like one class with, when you count up all those powers, an Ultramodern 4 class is about 3 or 4 times bigger. So they're the same amount of rule content, same number of classes, but there's just no doubt that let's see here. There's a copy of Ultramodern 5. But let's see here. Yeah. So when we look at the 2 books, yeah, 242 pages for Ultramodern 4 and only 200 pages. So yeah, there's a 40-page difference between the 2 books. And it came down to it because on Ultramodern 4, a 4th edition class, you have to include all of those powers. So that a single class is going to take many, many pages. Compare that to a 5th edition class, as you know, which is a lot smaller. So that's the reason why. But the content is, in fact, we actually refined a bit more content because in Ultramodern 5, we played with the genetic familiarity and so forth. Hey, Jen. So there's a lot more additional content in Ultramodern 5 than Ultramodern 4. Then we finally concluded our Kickstarter for Amethyst in May when we finally released this Colossus. And I'm not even joking. This is the crazy. So this is kind of showing you where we're actually looking at when it comes to kind of the production quality when we look at this book. Now, this obviously we're not going to do a fantasy theme with Ultramodern, so some of this this stuff here is not going to look. It's not going to have the same kind of aesthetic. It's going to have a bit more of a the antiseptic, more of a utilitarian mechanical approach to it, similar to what we did with Ultramodern. Some crazy. Let's see, you can get some cool illustrations here. Where are the dragons? Everyone likes dragons. Yeah, so great stuff there. So now that we have a few people on, and we can start answering questions. That basically brings the history. We started this one, and one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to do this, because I wanted to turn this and make this the way I wanted to make it, which is taking in all the stuff. Because in the original Ultramodern 5, we implied what you could do, but didn't tell you exactly how to do it. So we said you could do Weird West and space and cyberpunk, but didn't tell you specifically how to do spaceships. It's kind of like GURPS. Like the core GURPS works, but then you have to pick up all those other books like GURPS Cyberpunk or GURPS Space. And I didn't think I needed to give you guys like 14 books. I think I could do it all in one. So To go through the questions now that we have a few, let's go through. So is the modularity with other 5e sci-fi games expected? Hi, hello. Well, when I look at Ultramodern 5, I want it to, regardless of whichever version, if you have the new version or the old version, I want it to be able to plug into any other 5e books. That doesn't change them. So if I don't create a rule and someone else makes a cyberpunk game that you like better than Neurospasta, and they don't alter 5th edition philosophy, I want people to be able to incorporate those rules and add them in with mine. If there's a really good fantasy setting and you want to add guns to it, like you have Middle-earth role-playing, and I don't actually have Middle-earth role-playing, but let's say you had Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms, and you wanted to throw in something technological, like if you wanted to do Expedition to Barrier Peaks, which is a very classic adventure that shows you how old I am. I actually have a first printing of Expedition at Barrier Peaks in my bookshelf. And I'm not kidding, it is a first edition printing of Expedition to Barrier Peaks. And if you wanted to do something like that, then you could add Neurospasta, so you could add Ultramodern to your fantasy setting without changing the philosophy. We use all the rules, we add to them without changing anything. If we change something, then you can't interconnect Ultramodern with traditional fantasy. By the way, the Amethyst Factions has an included module, and that module is actually way back here. And it's called The Taking of Proto Jericho, and it's inspired by Expedition to Barrier Peaks. So in the course of the adventure, the players actually come across a spaceship. So there's actually the dungeon in the Amethyst Factions book is a spaceship, a 3-deck spaceship. The deck plans, by the way, are actually based off the Sulaco and aliens. Small Easter egg there. But that's what kind of my goal is to try to make it compatible. My obligation is for traditional fantasy and my own books, so Apex and Neurospasta. So if someone says, is this going to be compatible to Biopunk or some other 5th edition third-party game? I said I have no idea. I'm not going to be able to make it compatible to everything. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, Funny to Hit was an afterthought. It was. Hello. How are the Mech and Magic stretch goals looking? Well, they're looking good. I said in my comments in the update that I'm kind of taking a nostalgic twist. Like, I'm not looking to create something incredibly completely new that no one's seen before. I want to play off of things that people in my age bracket. I don't know how old most of you guys are. I'm going to be turning 45 in exactly a month. Well, a month and a day. I'll be turning 45. Unfortunately. And but I've been playing role-playing games since 1986. I played basic red box D&D, moved into West End, did Star Frontiers. Biggest regret I ever had was throwing out my Star Frontiers box. I'm really, really angry about that because I love Star Frontiers. My original homebrew website was serenadawn.com, which is a space station in Star Frontiers. But for the 1990s, the vast majority of my game play experience was actually not playing Dungeons & Dragons. I almost completely skipped second edition. I almost went from AD&D almost right to third. There was very little second edition D&D play because through the 90s, I was playing a lot of Palladium because I was a big fan of Robotech. So I was playing a lot of the Robotech Palladium games. And I also was a huge fan of the Artel-Zorian games. And I'm a huge fan of Mike Pondsmith, and I love the fact he's bringing back Cyberpunk 2077. I don't play as many video games as I used to, but I have a feeling that I need to get, if this thing comes out, if 2077 comes out end of year, that's going to be really useful because then I can finish this book and then vanish for a couple of weeks playing 2077. But I love what he did with Cyberpunk 2013, 2020. I think most people played 2020. That was probably the most successful book. But I was a huge fan of Mechton. And Mechton 2, which is the first one. I never got the original Mechton. Mechton 2, Mechton Zeta Plus, the technical manual. And I really liked the way they did their mech combat because 2 months younger than me. Oh, geez, Jeffrey. Oh, geez, happy birthday. Happy belated birthday. But anyway, the Mechton system, I liked that more than BattleTech because even though it's not, you couldn't technically do it, there was a way to play Mechton without a tabletop. You can just, because there was very few occasions playing Mechton we would actually use a tabletop. Most of the time we were just running, just rolling dice and moving things around. I love their construction system. But there are a couple of things that are unique. that are kind of unique to both Palladium's mech system and the way Mechton did it, and that was they used a double scaling hit point system, right? So Mechton had kills and then hits, and hits were 1 point of damage, and then a kill would be 10 hits. And then they had, for Palladium, they had mega damage, and mega damage had MD and then SD, and then SD was 100 points for 1 mega damage. And of course, it created these crazy, just completely nuts systems where in Rift, a juicer can do mega damage, and then a normal person would have like 25 standard SD damage of hit points, and one mega damage would just completely annihilate a regular human being. The kind of metric system of Altair-Zorian is the reason why I love Altair so much, because it was basically metric. And because it was base 10 dice, base 10 skills, base 10 everything. And I really love that system. If I were ever design a rule system from scratch, I would love to do something that hybridized the base 10 system from Altair-Zorian and mix that with some elements from D&D. But I would never do that without telling people that I was, hey, I'm making an original rule system that's going to blend D&D and Altair-Zorian's interlock system. One of my most successful homebrew games, period, until I got to doing things professionally, was the Fusion system. And one of my most famous homebrew games was a Fusion adaptation of Alien. So if any of you has ever played Alien Fusion, that was my creation. I did that in the mid-90s. And I love Fusion because Fusion was one of the very first open source game systems that you can download and make rules for. This was way before the 3.5 OGL. But Mechton was a very, very good system. But Mechton also had fixed damage. So if you had a laser weapon, it would do 6 kills and would always do 6 kills. You would roll 1 die 10, add your 1 to 10 skill, and that would be your final number if you hit. And if you hit, you would roll a hit location and do 6 kills. Very simple. Now, for me, the way we did weapons in Ultramodern 5, and this is something that's kind of giving you a bit of a lead of what I'm talking about how we're getting along with that. Most base weapons still kind of follow the tropes, the pattern set by where are the weapons here? Let's see, one more page, and here we go. So weapons. So and a lot of people have complained, and if someone really wants details of why I justified using the guns being like, what probably the biggest criticism people have is the fact that like a pistol, for example, would do 1 die 6. And people will say, well, no, a gun should be 3 times more powerful. And there was always these kind of really arbitrary numbers of why a pistol should do 3, 4, or 5 times. There's no scientific measurement of how much, because when you launch an arrow, for example, which is what most people compare it to, an arrow does 1 die 8 or 1 die 10. Therefore, a pistol should do 3d10. And it was just like, that doesn't make any sense because the system is arbitrary, right? An arrow does 1 die 10. You fire an arrow at something, the arrow has a lot more kinetic energy. Bullet's easier to stop, but an arrow, it's slower, but it has a lot more weight to it. So it's very hard to compare them to in a real scientific manner. But at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with science. It's just simply the arbitrary numbers that they put for weapons. So we put the pistols in the 1 die 6, 1 die 4 range, rifles in the 1 die 8 to 1 die 10, and the heavy weapons in the 1 die 12 to 2 die 8 range. And we decided to make, shoot them in arrows, exactly. So we decided to make the character classes. So whenever someone looks at our tables, a lot of people just completely discount it. And I've had people just say, I looked at your tables and your weapons don't do enough damage. And then fans who have read the book going, you can't just read the tables, you got to read the classes, because the classes are where the damage comes from. We all know that a rogue, like if you give a dagger to a magic user, he'll stab a guy for 8 points of damage. You give a dagger to a rogue, and he hits the guy for 35 points of damage because the rogue knows how to use that dagger better. And that's basically the same thing. So a sniper weapon in the hands of a gunslinger is not going to do much, but a sniper weapon in the hands of a sniper class is going to do a lot. So but going into our super heavy weapons, the super heavy weapons were a bit different. They did small dice damage with a modifier. So an autocannon would do 1 die 6 plus 6. A dense plasma focus cannon would do 1 die 10 plus 10. And that was a way of kind of mitigating the level of randomness. And with the mech weapons that we plan on introducing, that's going to follow that same trope. So some people were asking whether or not a mech's going to walk around with 500 hit points, but unless we introduce a mega hit point system, there's nearly no way of walking around that. And I didn't want to include a mega hit point system because it just feels like it forces a lot of unnecessary math. So yeah, unfortunately, mechs can have anywhere between 75 or 100 hit points, and some of the big ones will have like 600 hit points. Basically, if you're walking around with a Tarrasque, because I want people to be able to do that. If you wanted to have a big kaiju fight and have a giant robot, and you want to fight a Tarrasque, we don't plan on introducing. I might introducing a couple of kaiju. I think I should actually. That'd be awesome. I should introduce some kaiju. But the point is that even if you don't like any giant monsters that we introduce, you should still be able to take monsters from Monster Manual and then fight them with your mech without having to alter any rules. So that was the other kind of thing I wanted to make sure you could do, was be able to play that system. But the weapons that these mechs are going to be doing, they're not going to be doing 1d6, they're not going to be doing 2d8, and you're not going to be doing 5d6. You're most likely going to be having a weapon that's going to do, 1d10 plus 10, or 1d4 times 10. Therefore, you're doing a lot of damage no matter what. But the weapons do a lot of powerful base damage. I like that Gagagzilla. But so that's how we're doing the weapon system. So a mech pistol is going to, by minimum, always do 10 damage, probably more. So it won't be a situation where a pistol does 6d6 and you roll whatever chance, you roll 6 ones. And then the other thing we're doing with mech combat is something we played on with Ultramodern, something called Ultramax, which was a previous update, which is a bunch of optional rules for hit location. Because that's one of the other things about mechs, which a lot of people like, is hit location. So it's not just one giant hit point pool you have to lay down. You can hit locations, disable systems, and so forth. So that's going in there as well. But you're still going to be, it won't be separated. So you won't have 40 hit points on each arm, because that's going to get too complicated. There's going to be a single hit point, but it's going to be damaged. So as you go past certain thresholds, depending on how many times you've hit certain locations could shut down. So there's some elements in there as well. A magic system, I know it's not going to be a Vancian system, so it's not going to be using levels. I personally like the idea of assembling kind of assembling a spell, kind of playing off my inspiration off of board games by being a system where you can activate certain power nodes in order to accomplish different effects. It's going to be kind of similar to the way we are doing the superpower system in Apex. In Apex, you would purchase a feat that gave you a certain ability, and you can purchase that feat over and over and over and over, and that feat gets more and more powerful. So it's going to be kind of similar to that, except you would be your spellcraft would be focusing on certain schools, but instead of there being 4 or 5 schools, there's probably going to be a lot of different elements to go through. So there wouldn't be evocation. There'd be earth, water, air, and life. And I guess if we're doing the whole Captain Planet, maybe heart. But there are these multiple elements that you can tap in, and you can create multiple effects. Now, oddly enough, I'm actually hoping on creating a system which is part of the mecha construction system that allows you to construct weapons the same way, where you can take certain pieces of different weapons and make a certain type of weapon. That's very much inspired from Dead Space 3. We talked about that in a previous update. So yeah, my first priority is getting the mecha system done first. Actually, the first priority is, of course, going through the original Ultramodern 5 and getting that system updated and figuring out where we need to fix, where we need to add some new classes, add some new ladders, add races, because Ultramodern doesn't have races, and we're including races, which will kind of tie into some of the adventures and the settings that are being presented in Ultramodern 5. And then after that, we're handling the construction system for mecha, and then magic will probably be last. That's because a magic one is probably going to require the most testing. The mecha one, we've done a lot of testing of it, and I've got a lot of experience. I have already done a 5e campaign many years ago where I incorporated mech construction into that. So I've already tested this system out. Like, I'm not even kidding, like 5 years ago, I've already tested this system out. So now I have to expand on it and get everyone to test it and see whether or not we were a fluke. Let's see what else we have. Are you going to add advantages in Ultramodern 5 Redo, or are you sticking with +2 to rolls? The advantage/disadvantage is kind of a core mechanic to fifth edition. So I'm going to be implementing that a lot more. That being said, I like the idea of giving people multiple advantage or multiple disadvantage. So every time you have advantage, it stacks. So 2 to 3 or 4. So you may have to roll. Maybe you have triple advantage and you have to roll 3 times, depending on that. It's something that they didn't really endorse, but there are some games that do play with stacking advantages. Malifaux, for example, has an advantage system where you draw 2 cards and you can have triple advantage, which is 3 cards or 4 cards, depending on that. So I don't think there's nothing broken about using that. I'd like to add that as an optional rule, and it might include characters and may say, look, this is a rule that I think is good, and you guys should probably play with it. But no advantages. But that was the other thing, is that 5th edition D&D seems to really dissuade static bonuses. I'd have no problem with it. I think the problem I've often said is that Dungeons & Dragons has an issue with the random number generator. And if you ever saw the original alpha playtest for D&D 5th edition, which I had access to, the 5e system way back during the Friends and Family playtest, this is when I think Monty Cook was on it. The random number generator was just a disaster. The spells were contested. So if I had a targeted spell, I'd make an attack roll, and then you'd make a defense roll, and then I would have my +3 or +4 to bonus, and then you would have your +3 to +4 to bonus. But if you're going to take that and you do the math on that, which I did, it's only about 20% that your character actually matters. Most of the success failure is entirely random chance. And one thing we've learned from board games, especially the development of the evolution of board games in the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm not talking Monopoly, I'm talking about the really good advanced board games. Through this door right there is a collection of 200 board games. My pen and paper role-playing games are in my bedroom. But they've learned how much of a balance should be for the randomness, how much of your success is dependent on the random number generator and how much should be dependent on your skill. And D&D, especially in the early levels, you are a real slave to that random number generator. So I would like to mitigate that. Advantage is one way of doing it, having that reroll. But I think solid modifiers and other ways to adjust the number. That's why I like players being able to be emboldened and not to constantly be depressed by just a random number generator working against them. I've had abilities in the past with characters where they could set their die roll, or they, depending on their certain skill, had a minimum roll they would always get. And I think that was always a good idea. And I've always made a comment in some of my previous streams and interviews that I said that Gordon Ramsay never rolls a fumble. Gordon Ramsay has reached the point that he can never roll a 1, right? So that's kind of like he always rolls at least a 10, right? He can take 10 or take 20, and then taking 10, taking 20 has kind of been removed from 5th edition. Taking 20, absolutely. And there was a reason why those were in there in 3.5, and I think that there's a point where we can give characters that are really good at what they do the capacity to mitigate that randomness. I have the UM4 PDF. Never seen Amethyst before. What is it about? Amethyst is a collision of magic and fantasy in the modern world. So imagine you're living in your hometown, whether you guys may be. I live in Prince George. Whether you guys are in Edmonton or Calgary or Seattle or Athens. Imagine you're in a situation where you can build a wall around that town. And if you want to go to your next town, whether it be Quesnel in my case, which is about an hour's drive, you'd have to drive through Middle Earth. And so it'd be much more hostile. So you'd have to have an armored convoy that would take you from one walled city to another walled city. And the reason why that you have that walled city, not just because there are goblins and trolls out there, but because magic breaks down technology. So it's kind of like an electromagnetic pulse, but more powerful. It can actually alter reality so that even gunpowder doesn't explode reliably. So when you have areas where there's no magic in these walled cities, technology is able to function because reality resumes. But if surrounded by people who are spellcasters or people who are magical like elves, they radiate this enchantment, this disruption field that alters reality. It never disrupts reality to the point of ending life, but it actually creates life, and creates life in ways that normal science would deem impossible. So this story is set 500 years in the future. It's somewhat post-apocalyptic because mankind is pushed into these walled cities, kind of like the mega cities from Judge Dredd. But instead of the wasted earth, you have this rich, beautiful landscape of elves and dragons and humans and this fantasy kingdom, and it deals with the collision of these two worlds. I don't say which one's right and which ones are wrong, but there is obviously an overarching campaign regarding these amethyst artifacts, which could end the world of magic or increase its power for it would be uncontested across the world. So that's Amethyst. So that's where we take our rules from inspiration for the for Ultramodern. It's Amethyst. The core book of Amethyst and the expansion for Amethyst is available for almost every system. You can get it for 5th edition, 4th edition. I think my old 3rd edition's out there, Pathfinder, Fate Core, Savage World, 13th Age. 13th Age community is fantastic, but the sales aren't there, so I may not support it in the future, which is too bad because I really like 13th Age. So that's Amethyst. So Amethyst is kind of a magnum opus. Ultramodern is not going to hit that kind of quality. So the whole point is to get this to be this, right? That's kind of the goal. So the production quality of this matches this, and then the book size would match as well. So if people think we can't do it, obviously we've done it just recently, and we'll do it again. So, okay, where does Neurospasta fit in with Ultramodern 5 Redo? Will we see a Neurospasta redo? I'm not against the idea of remastering Apex and Neurospasta. Apex is the more successful between the two of them, probably because it's only like $5 and people like superheroes. We're going to be adding in some of the cybernetics, but not the setting specific cybernetics as well as the setting from Neurospasta. And it's something we might look at. I think that there'll be enough cool stuff within Ultramodern that we probably wouldn't need to. I think the only reason why we would is to patch some of the rules, like some of the manipulator rules, and are a little finicky. I was trying to give people real Ghost in the Shell feel, and it got a little weird. And some people asked a lot of questions about that. I have no problems about it. I think the only reason why I would do a Neurospasta reboot is to do the color. I don't think there's a lot of extra content I could add other than just doing another adventure within the setting. Ultramodern 5, there was so much I could add to it, but Neurospasta, like I said, was I think a pretty good book. Apex, the only thing I would do if I did Apex was I would probably expand the setting and include an adventure, because Apex just gives you the basic ideas of a setting, but there's no adventure. I just give you the tools. I don't think I would want to. I don't think there's anything. No one's really complained about any rules in Apex, probably because it's so completely crazy that it's hard to find. When you're trying to break a rule system, it's hard to find a broken rule when we're intentionally encouraging people to overpower themselves and so forth. Like when we designed Apex, we weren't thinking about game balance. And I think because we said, you know what, be overpowered. We don't care. You should be who you want to be. I think I would love to do a color reboot of Apex, but I was tempted to include Apex, but I felt really cheap. If in order to get this book to this book, we just added the other books in, that would be cheating, in my opinion. So we're not no plans currently to release Neurospasta or Apex as color reboots. If we did, I'd probably do Apex, but my love is with Amethyst. So if I were to do another project after Ultramodern, I would think I would want to do another Amethyst book. Let's see here. Let's see. Game Master did like 2030 with. Oh yeah, I never actually played Cyberpunk 2030. That's kind of thing. I kind of missed it. It was 2013 and 2020, and by 2030 came out, we had moved on to 3.5 to 3.0 D&D back in 2000 when we first did Amethyst. So I never had a chance. The font's been an interesting point too, because it's not really talking about that, but our font has been a pretty decent size. When we went to into Amethyst Factions, we actually increased the font even larger and then also double spaced it. Considering the amount of content going into it, I had this long, hard budget that I wasn't allowed to go over about 450 pages for Ultramodern Redo. So if it turns out I'm going over budget, I may have to shrink the text size. And I'm hoping I don't have to, because a lot of people complain. I would love Cyberpunk without levels. Well, I love the idea of. I mean, that's why I love Artelzorian, because you can develop your individual skills and there's no levels. But 5th edition is defined by levels, so there are always going to be levels. Like I said, I would love to do an alien campaign, like Alien Fusion for 5th edition. But it'd be weird to have characters that are 15th level because you have to have the aliens that move up in levels with you. I still think it's possible, because I think anything's possible. It would just be tricky. So one big mech versus beholder. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like the idea of people being able to fight whatever they want to fight in the player in the Dungeon Master's Guide with mecha. Is this magic system compatible with 5e Vanciant or replaces it? Well, you can have a spellcaster that's a Vanciant spellcaster, and you can have this alternate spellcasters being presented in Ultramodern in the same campaign, and they'll be balanced. So that's the first question. I know there's two approaches to this question, but answer the first part of the question, that you could run them both in the same campaign, and they won't be, one will not be more unbalanced. I will say that I will think that the one we're presenting will appear to be able to do more things within their, well, yes and no. Remember, the Vanciant spellcaster has to prepare his spell, so he has to kind of have this kind of psychic awareness of what he's going to be using that day, where the one we're adapting, you don't have to do any of that. You can just basically, that being said, since you're specializing in certain fields, there's certain things that you know you're capable of. So if you're going to be a person that's going to be more of an enchanter, then you're not going to be launching like the fireballs or lightning bolts as much. So once again, you are still going to be specialized. You're not just going to be this this bouillabaisse of basically being able to do everything. You have to specialize in certain fields, and as you create your character, you'll be really good at certain fields, but you won't be as limited as compared to the Vanciant system. To answer the next kind of implication. Could one guy have both? Not technically, I don't think so. I also don't think that you couldn't merge the two systems together, because they'll be very, very different, because we are moving away from the idea of spell levels, moving away from the idea of specific named spells. So, and the other thing, of course, is that we're not designing this magic system to offer this alternative to traditional Gygaxian or Tolkien-like fantasy. We're offering this magical system as a way of playing in with this kind of more mental, almost psionic-based magic systems that we see in these paranormal modern stories, like I said, the Weird West, or magic in the modern day, but magic in a system that doesn't require a spell book or spell preparation and so forth. So our loyalty is to try to honor some of these other methods of spell casting in some of these non-fantasy settings. No, there won't be a mech called DS Machina. So let's see. What's that mean? Your main girl in the bedroom and the sign sleeps outside? I don't understand that. Are mechas customizable? Absolutely. We always have. We've had mecha and giant robots in the game since the original Amethyst Foundations. We were putting in power armor. Back then, the power armor system was it was a good system in its own confines. Like the way we did it was that if you got like a power armor, it was the equivalent of like 5 magic items, and we actually did that. If you look at the Amethyst Foundations, let's see if we can find here. Yeah. So see, this is the first book, and let's see if I can get to the mechs there. Those guys don't care about the free houses. Let's see, equipment, and we get to the tables of grenades, and then to once again, printing back then wasn't great. So, for example, an Apostle Modal Slave or a mobile mortar armor like this guy over here, for example, he is the equivalent of 3 items: a level 22, a level 18, and a level 17. So, in terms of game balance, he would have 3 magic items with his 1 power armor: 122, 118, 117. The other thing we did with those guys is they had their own hit points, but there was a threshold. So the mobile mortar armor would have a threshold of, I think, 5. So every time you took damage, you would take hit points, but the armor would take 5 of those hit points. And that was basically how we did that system. And then they would also have special abilities. Those special abilities also created magic items. So when we moved into something like Amethyst Factions, where we started to really play around with what we could do with mecha, we go to the Saint chapter, for example, in there. There we go. Where's the mech? So we got that guy over there, which is a power armor that's in Amethyst Factions. Okay. And something like that guy, he has all of these special abilities right here. Okay. So that was basically how we did that system. So these were the equivalent of multiple magic items. So you'd have a resistance fire, you get an enhancement bonus, you gain some immunities, and so these were the equivalent of magic items. So, if a magic user, if a magical fighter had like a magic ring, a magic cloak, bracers of whatever, gauntlets of whatever, and a magic sword, if you had a power armor and a laser and a single weapon, for a person that was wielding technology, you had the equivalent of all those magic items in just those 2 items. So that was the original system. They weren't customizable because in Amethyst we were giving out setting-specific stuff and we weren't giving people the toolbox. When we went to Ultramodern 5, we rebranded that power armor, but we didn't give people a construction system. So even if we had not unlocked the mecha construction system, you still would have seen power armor and mecha in Ultramodern. What we are creating now is that system where you can create any mecha you want. And once again, we're taking the Mechton Zeta as an inspiration on how to do that. So you should be able to create the power armor, like the 10 or 15 foot tall power armor. And you should be able to make giant kaiju style giant robots like Giant Robo or from Pacific Rim using that exact same system. You should be able to make Transformers. You should be able to make Veritex. You should be able to make anything from any anime, because that's what Mechton Zeta was wanting to do. It wanted you to create a mecha from any single system you wanted. So you could create things that are made of nanites. You can make things that are semi-magical. And that's basically how that system works. So we want to not we want to make people, like when we did Apex, we did superheroes for Apex. We kind of made them somewhat grounded in reality. So you can make a lot of superheroes, but it wasn't really easy to make Superman. You can make like for Apex, the inspiration for Apex was there's a movie called Push that I really love. And so that and Heroes was kind of my inspiration. And then to lesser extent, maybe a few of the X-Men. But there weren't you could make Captain Marvel, but I think the really powerful like Superman and a few others, that would have been really tricky without just making him 18th, 20th level. And then that would work. Or like Neo. Like you could do Neo in Apex, but he would just be the one guy who's 20th level. So it's not really necessarily game balancing when everyone's walking around as 5th or 6th level. Trinity is 5th level and Morpheus is 6th level and then Neo is 20th level. And you're like, okay, I think one of us is not exactly game balanced. So that was kind of our system. So with mecha, that's kind of the same. That's the biggest challenge with mecha, because when the GM creates a system, he's going to say, okay, we're running at 5th level. So the mechs are running 5th level. So the mechs, and this is where things get really tricky. And this is going to be the biggest challenge going forward, because there'll be definitely situations where you're 5th level and you are fighting creatures that are 10th or 12th level, but you're able to defeat them because you're in a mecha. Because that's basically the whole thing. A normal person can't fight a kaiju and like a Tarrasque. If we call a kaiju a Tarrasque, because so Tarrasque is kind of like those level 4, stage 4 kaiju from Pacific Rim. And you're looking at that, was like, well, obviously there's no person, no matter how big their level is, can really stand up to them. But if you had a 20th level mech, you probably could. So there's that. The trick is, of course, is saying, well, you can't suddenly get the 4 million experience points and say, oh, I killed a Tarrasque on a level 20 mech, I get to go up the level. I go, no, unfortunately not. Unfortunately, you get the experience for a 5th level beast. The mech doesn't get any experience in its own. So that there has to be a balanced system in there. So that's basically the idea, the fact that you can make your characters levels any level you want, and then the mechs can be any level that they want, and then whoever you fight. So the real challenge is actually balancing XP rewards, because the moment you balance an XP reward and you can have a 2nd level mech pilot in a 10th level mecha fighting a 10th level creature. Killing a 10th level creature is not going to give you a level 10 XP reward, because then that second level character will jump to 4th level, and you won't have a fair and balanced progression system. So if you're a second level fighter and you kill a 10th level creature with a 10th level mecha, you're not getting 10th level XP. You're getting a second level XP. If you're doing it, if there's a difference, and if you're in an 8th level mecha and you find a 10th level creature, you still get it. Then you get a bit better reward. That's going to be the most challenging portion, is making sure that system is balanced. Because I think that's going to be the interesting concept. Designing the mecha construction system as it is, once again, if people who've owned any of the R. Talzorian games, any of the interlock game system like Mechtin, in the same way, because when you look in Ultramodern 5, we have this life path system, which a lot of people have commented about how much they love. A similar system shows up in Amethyst Factions as well. And this system, it's interesting, and for those people who remember that we came out with this in 2016, then what's his name? Xanthar's Guide to Everything came out, I think, a year after, that separates the backgrounds and life path and creates a big table. And so there's been a lot of people that have asked whether or not they borrowed the life path system in Xanthar's Guide to Everything from Ultramodern. And my comment is that, well, I didn't create it originally. I ripped mine off of the Cyberpunk 2020 life path system. So because whenever we made characters, and this has been ever since 2020 came out in the mid-early 90s, doesn't matter if we use GURPS or any version of D&D, most of my players loved using this 2020 life path system to create. So you would generate how many enemies you had, how many love affairs you might have had, go through every single year of your life and finding out what cool things happen. Players loved creating that level of complexity. And the way I run my games, which are very much very narrative based, it became very important to do so. So I basically I created a 5th edition version of that was something closer to what I wanted. And so we plan on doing the same thing, taking that inspiration from Mechtin Zeta and taking that ideology and then converting that into a 5th edition framework. So will it be hard to create? Because I know how much of it can be customizable. I'm hoping to create as much customization as possible and to make that balance within 5th edition. Like I said, the biggest problem is going and making the reward system balanced. I think once the reward systems are balanced, then basically everything should fall into place. Yes, I like larger text as much as the next person, but we also deal with how much content we're including. Luckily, Ultramodern, the reason why Amethyst Factions, probably as much as, because Amethyst Factions, I think probably about that much, maybe that much is actually rules. And then we have monsters taking up about this much in the back. And then basically this is all setting. And Ultramodern is going to have some adventures, but it's not going to have a full-on setting. So I'm not going to spend 60 pages detailing a setting. Now, Ultramodern 5 has two adventures. It has a alien invasion called Invasion Proxy, and then a zombie apocalypse. His name is skipping me. What was that zombie apocalypse called? Biohazard. Yeah. So those two, I was going to reprint them and redo, but I'm not anymore. I'm creating 3 original adventures. And as we said, the parallel universe setting of Terminals is going to be kind of the default setting that's going to permeate the book. And then we're going to have a space horror story called Periphery. And I think, and then we're going to have Necropolis, which is I think it was Bubblepunk and Neurospaz, and I think we're doing Conestoga as well. I know the space horrors, and I got to check the expansion. But there'll be 3 adventures in the final book, and that stuff will be original. I'm referring to where you keep your RPGs, particularly your board games. Yeah, well, the thing is, my like I said, I was an idiot, and I threw out a bunch of role-playing games when I got older and I moved out of the house for the first time. And I really, really regret that, because I had, what did I have? I didn't have Basic Red Box. I always borrowed Basic Red Box, but I had Star Frontiers, I had Top Secret, I had the green and blue box. No, I didn't have green. I had green and I had orange box D&D, which people think are, because the basic D&D set only got you a few levels, and then there was the expert and the advanced and so forth, and then there was a pink box and the black box. I think I had the black box, and I think I had the pink box. Yeah, and so I had all of those, and I threw them all out, and I don't know why. Star Frontiers on probably the biggest thing I'm upset about, but I stopped doing that quite a few years ago. So I still have, for example, I still have all my West End books. It's the box sets I mostly threw out. Like I used to have original BattleTech Leviathan. Somebody posted on a 5th edition forum about his old boxes. He had all these boxes of Leviathan and BattleTech. I was like, boy, that brings back memories. And I threw a bunch of those out, and I really regret it because I really don't like the fact that I threw out those books. But I still have 3 big shelves with a lot of D&D, a lot of stuff all the way back from AD&D all the way to 5th edition. I still have all my Mech-10 books, still got all my Palladium books, still have like every single Robotech Palladium book. So the board games are in there because they're in a brand new shelf, and because I can have 150 books that fit on one bookshelf, but 150 games requires an entire room. So, liking Amethyst more and more. Okay, well, yeah. So it'll be. You have to make sure, because it will be. What we've offered is just the 5th edition books on the Pledge Manager, is because it's a 5th edition campaign. So we've talked about Amethyst Quintessence and Amethyst Factions. If you go to Drive-Thru RPG, you will be able to find Amethyst with the other systems. Amethyst Factions is also available for other systems. It's not available for Fate or Savage World yet, because that's being written by a guy named Chris Stilson, who's my editor. And when Christopher is done with those, they'll get released. Yeah, I love the Life Path system. Have I revealed the alternate cover yet? Well, I don't know. We are putting the alternate cover to a vote. And even the current cover, which is one thing I've been saying now, was never really meant to be the permanent cover. But as time has passed on, I started to like it more and more. And I really think it's kind of a cool cover. So I'm hoping that probably will be our unofficial cover. We don't know. It's going to depend on if Nick is feeling comfortable with it. And if he's feeling comfortable with that for the cover of Ultramodern 5, we'll stick with it. And then the alternate's going to be he's going to sketch up 2 or 3 alternatives. We'll put it to a vote, and we'll see which one people like, and then that'll become finalized. And then the others, well, we're still working on how we're going to work on the alternate cover, but how we can handle it with the printers. But yeah, it should be pretty cool. Okay, so this is the whole tariff thing. Okay, so everything I've seen so far seems to indicate that these tariffs are affecting specifically some board games, like board game components. And I haven't seen anything specifically for novels and books, because the vast majority of the book printing in the world, there's a guy, I can't remember his name, Mike Seletsky. He created the Pathfinder card game and another card game called Apocrypha. And he did a great article for Kotaku when he was talking about how destructive these tariffs are going to be, and how the fact that tariffs are really, if you're an economist, and I have a background in microeconomics, know that tariffs are a tremendously bad idea. And unfortunately the costs are taken on by if America lays down tariffs, and there's no infrastructure within America to compensate and fill that niche, most companies won't bother. They'll still keep on using foreign, and then all those increased prices get passed off to consumer. So suddenly it's the American public having to pay for all that. So, and it's unfortunate, but that's the truth. And as this article stated, when it comes to board games specifically, there is only one reliable board game manufacturer in America. When I say board game manufacturer, these guys that will do every aspect, because that's what these guys do. Like people like Panda and Longpack and a few others in China, they're attractive because they can create any type of board game, and they'll do everything. They'll do miniatures, meeples, manual, boards, tokens, dice, everything. So you never have to refer to multiple companies. You do the whole thing, and then they put them into one box, and they ship you the box, and that's it. And it's really useful because they do all the work. And that's the reason why there's so many board games, because China has created the infrastructure. There's only one of these guys in America, and they are not as cheap, not even close to being as cheap as China. So a lot of times they're referring to Chinese publishers in order to do their work, because they have the infrastructure and logistics. Even when you ship and you pay for shipping and you deal with customs, it is still cheaper. Now, when as you guys might know, you can't purchase Ultramodern 5 in retail shelves. It's available through, we have a facilitator called Studio 2 Publishing in Tennessee. They ship games out to Alliance, Universal, ACD, and a whole bunch of others. And so you can find the original Ultramodern 5 in game stores. And we are going to be releasing the redo out as well. But it's going to be a very short run. It'll actually only be easier to get one of these in retails than the new. There are a few guys who are retail backers, and they will definitely be an exclusive sort, because I think if we get to like 750 books ordered, we'll round it up to an even 1,000, but that'll still put 5 times more of these in the market than the Ultramodern. I think it's definitely going to be a limited run. So when we did the Ultramodern 5 printing, it cost, let's see, what did it cost us? I think the local printers were, I think, as much as $8 to $10 a book, the people we were investigating. And in comparison, the Chinese printers were, I think, $4 a book. And then I think it added up to about $5 or $6 a book by the time it hit Tennessee. So yeah, it was about $6 a book all in for $6,000. So for 1,000 bucks for get Ultramodern 5 to Tennessee. And that includes shipping, and that included customs and everything. It got to Tennessee's door for that amount of money. And the fact that even counting all of that, it still costs more money. And this is one of those situations where I'm still haven't 100% checked how the tariffs are going to affect books, because from what I've seen, if you think game publishing is big in China, book publishing destroys it completely. There's so much book coming out of China because they have they have city blocks of just printing warehouses. I know I've seen photos, and I've been to China, so I've seen how big their production facilities are, and they have the logistics that they've underwritten all of that. So let's say there's a tariff and they increase each book by $2 or $3. I am not a major corporation. I'm me. I'm my fiance. I have Nick, who's in the comments. I have an editor out of Edmonton. I have a layout guy. I actually have no idea where Jeremy Simmons lives. I know Nick's in North Carolina, and my editor is in Edmonton. And I don't know where Jeremy Simmons is. And my cover is done by a guy named Josh Ratzik. I don't know where he lives, but those guys are all on commission. I always considered it kind of it's kind of Nick and in my show, because I feel like it's at the end of the day, it's kind of basically our business as much as anything. So as a result, I don't have a lot of other charges. So when the book gets shipped from one destination to another, I don't have to pay like 14 employees. As a result, I have that freedom to play with. If I end up losing $2 here and there, it's something that I can eat. So let's say if I put 1,000 books and they're like $6 a book, and by the time it hits Tennessee, a tariff has increased that cost that book to $10. Yeah, it's going to hit me, but it's not going to really. I'm not going to jack up the price of the book by that cost. I can't see why I would do that. And I'm also, we might miss it. I mean, there's ways around it. We could also, if we're really desperate and we find out that the tariffs are just going to kill us, we'll ship to Canada, and we will get a Canadian warehouse to receive it, and then we'll move it from Canada to Tennessee. We'll circumvent, right? Because I do believe the issue right now will be sending it from China into America gets that tariffs. I think if you take it to Canada and then move it across the border, then it won't. You can't circumvent that. You run the risk of having to pay duty twice. But I think we're not going to bother. I think we're just going to ship it directly from China. Because I think in total, The book run's not going to cost very much, so I don't think any tariffs are going to really hit us very hard. So anyway, that was a good question, and I know I had a long answer, and I really winded there, Cristiano. Let's see. Would you attempt a book that is like Monster Vault, Threats to the Nimtervale? Well, Amethyst is, I mean, even Amethyst Factions is like 70-80% monster world. In Amethyst Factions, we introduce one new race. I don't know, we introduced three races, but two of them are kind of really heavily optional for GMs. So because we introduced Saints and Demons, and by default, you really shouldn't be able to play them as player characters, but I never say no to anybody. So the vast majority of Factions is as a world book for the GM. So the first 40, 50 pages is probably semi-PC content, and then the rest of the 300-some pages is just world and monsters and adventure. And if we go on with another Amethyst book, next Amethyst book will be encompassing Europe, and that's going to be, once again, heavily GM slanted. So it's going to be mostly monsters in world. Will we see background features this time around? Well, so the way Life Path works is that Life Path gives you some elements of a background. It allows you to basically create your own backstory. Now let's see if I can. Where the classes and archetypes here? Where the Life Path system in this book? Oh, this is Nicole's book. I just realized. So you do have your background origins in Ultramodern 5. So you have these backgrounds here. Now they're very, very basic compared to something like Amethyst or in traditional D&D, where they are much, much more detailed with a lot more character history. Like we go into Quintessence. And we go into, see if I can find them, into that Life Path here. Ability score improvement. Where are the two stream finishing moves? Let's see if I can find it here. Where is it? Dead errors. Everyone wants to see. There we go. So in the backgrounds in Amethyst were very much kind of traditional 5th edition. So you'd pick like Bastionborn, and then you'd have a huge backstory, and then rules, and then possible life paths you can roll or select. And that's basically how the system worked. Obviously, since we're not going to have setting-specific stuff, or we're going to have semi-setting-specific stuff, we're going to be introducing a lot more life path background detail. So they won't be generic life path. We'll still have them. We'll still have drifters and recluse and so forth. But then we'll have a lot more setting-specific stuff for terminals. Stuff from various worlds. We may include some from Neurospasta, or just generic setting ones like this. So there'll be a real clash of this is your alien background. These are a couple cyberpunk backgrounds, and then there'll be more backgrounds in Ultramodern 5. So yes, that'll be in there as well. Pardon me. All right, what else, guys? Any questions? Ask away. Should have gotten a sore throat lozenge. So we are sitting at 54,495 at 735 pledges. So I think we're almost guaranteed we're going to hit 55, and so that's the next part one. And then of course at 60 is Affinity, and I know no one's asked about Affinity. Affinity was a project that Nick and I had bounced around. I threw the idea to him almost 3 years ago as a follow-up project to Amethyst, and he really, really liked it. The whole concept was we have 3 different settings that all have the exact same vocabulary, the exact same, some of the exact same, not say ideology, but same type of, they rhyme is one word. I think George Lucas plays on that terminology. So we'll see certain ideas pop up in every single setting. But the challenge from an artistic standpoint, this is where Nick got interested, that he would have to draw the same kind of illustration in 3 different styles. So one setting of Affinity, which I call kind of Conestoga, but is this giant space opera. Big, it kind of almost like we're the epic scale of BattleTech, but it was almost like a Dune, but with giant robots sort of thing. And it dealt with, a medieval class system in deep space. But this one is going to be kind of more confined and deal with more about this external threat that's threatening this empire. Then we have a steampunk setting on this post-apocalyptic world, and then we have another one which is a fantasy setting that's built into a full-scale orrery. Now, for those people who don't know what an orrery is, an orrery is a kind of a medieval mock-up of a solar system when you have the little levers and the little things rotating around. And the one I think of the most is Aughra's model in the Dark Crystal. Now, these guys who watch Dark Crystal, there's this amazing scene where the main character goes to see this old lady, and she has this giant solar system model, and it's just rotating. It's just this giant mechanical stuff. And I thought, hey, that'd be cool. Imagine if the entire world was actually that shape with huge, big arms and levers and a big giant sphere. So that's basically what this fantasy world is like. So you're in one fantasy world, and there's this giant canyon and this giant arm, and then there's a planet. There's just literally orbits, and one of them planet orbits, I think, only like 150 feet off the ground. So there's these moments where these two planetoids, where two cities are basically linked, and they have a big celebration in the 2 or 3 days where these two cities glide past each other, stuff like that. And there's some really neat ideas. But there's common threads. So there's terminology, like there are these houses, and these houses names like Draco and a few others. They're present on all three settings, and some of the specific character names, you'll see specific character names pop up. And then more importantly, there's a unifying threat. And that unifying threat, and the unifying threat is a threat that's facing all three. So the implication that these are three parallel universes that are all being under the threat of the same enemy at the same time. And in my original run the campaign, because this world is, and because these three universes are under the threat at the exact same moment from the same threat, things are starting to leak between the three realities because they both are fighting the same fight. And that was basically Affinity. So the art styles implications, so that if you, for example, from Amethyst here. So we would have an illustration like that, which is a Marshall image from Amethyst, and you'd have that image, and that could say be the space opera, and then he would have to draw the exact same image in a different style, but this time for the steampunk one, and then he'd have to draw the exact same image a third style for the fantasy one, and that was the implication of. So if you had the three books, you could move between the three books and spot kind of like an Easter egg hunt, finding the images that are pairing from each other, and you could and so when you see a terminology or a person being mentioned, and then you go to the other book and you read that book, you'll find that same person referenced again, and so you kind of pick up these kind of patterns between these three books. So the fantasy, the orrery, that one is completely finished. The steampunk one is mostly finished, and the mech one is just in note form. So if we get to 60,000, which is the last, which said it's getting tight. We are 4 days away. 4 days away to make up just a little over $5,500. It's gonna be real tight. They always say that there's always a surge by the end. So we'll see if we get that last bit of FOMO surge, and if we get that last bit of FOMO surge, then maybe we'll get to 60,000. But remember, that's not all of it too. There's going to be a post-campaign crowdfunding going to go on just to catch the people that might have missed the Kickstarter. And then there's a pledge manager, because we still have people that are waiting in the wings. There are about 30 people that are at the pledge manager now. Oh, there we go. We got the 736 at 54,517. So now we're at 5,500 to get between today, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. I think it ends at 9 o'clock on Wednesday. So yeah, Infinity is really, really cool. They are going digital. The only physical book is Ultramodern, and now the GM screen. And I think, by the way, speaking of that, I think the opinion now from the masses that people want the 4-seam GM screen. A 4-seam GM screen means it's 5 pages. There were a few people that wanted the 3-seam 4-page, but there seems to be an overwhelming support for the 4-seam. That does make it a bit more expensive. I think it puts it to the $18, $19 price point. But I know Nick is probably sweating hearing that because I haven't told him. I told him that was a possibility, but it looks like it's getting closer to that possibility that there's going to be a 4-seam 5-page screen. There won't be any booklets or something in there, not including any adventure. It's just going to be the screen. It's going to feature tables, all the important information, and obviously now that we're including stuff from Mecha, we'll include that, which is probably why we should be going to 5-screen anyway. Yeah, Nick's getting, his eyes are wide open. He's getting worried. But that does mean we're going to create an illustration that's going to be probably 55 inches across. And it's going to be entirely up to him how he wants to draw that. If he wants to do a collage, and we can cut parts of that collage and use those as illustrations in the main book, or if he wants to create. And the thing is, Nick says, like, Nick, you see Nick getting, but you have to remember, and this is important, a lot of guys here, a lot of you people have, guys and gals have backed the Ultramodern print. The vast majority printed the Ultramodern print, which is 74 Canadian. Now, for just about over $10 more, you can get into the illustrated Ultramodern. And I've explained many times what that means. It means you get access to the shared directory. And we dump every image relating to this campaign in there, all the sketches, all the final images, and then the original layered PSDs. Now, when I used to work with certain artists, including Jamie Jones and so forth, they would send me 72 to 150 DPI images, 8x7, 7x7 or 8.5x11, depending on the full page. And that image is really only functional at that resolution. And so there's not much you can do. Now, if you guys see my house here, flip that over, you can see I actually have there, another one over there, those are the 2 illustrations from Jamie Jones. Way over, I won't say this because it'll show you my fiance who doesn't like being on camera. But over there, I have the Last Supper image that's a very famous, it's almost iconic image from Amethyst that Nick did. So that image is a gigabyte in size. Now, if anyone knows anything about digital illustration, no, that is nuts. That is absolutely crazy. That means you could blow that image up to 12 feet across without really reducing any quality. You can't see it in that quality, but if you zoom in enough, you can see little smiley faces and radiation symbols on the little bolts and gears on the central character of Kairos. And yet Nick has said, and I'm speaking on his behalf because he's not on the chat. Well, he is, but he's not live. Otherwise, he'd be talking more. But he also hates to be on camera, so he's happy about this. So this image right here, which is the cover for Neurospasta, Nick has said in many occasions that this was the most difficult illustration he's ever had to do. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, this was him really reaching outside of his comfort zone by drawing something that was non-fantasy. That was the first thing. It's got a lot of glare in there. But the other reason, of course, is how we built this image. So the image is actually multi-layered. So the clouds are one layer, the city's one layer, the background's one layer, this darkness is one layer, the logo's one layer, these people are one layer. So this is actually the same image, the exact same image. We just took out the characters and took out the logo. But I actually could take out the black as well and the clouds because inside there's an illustration which is just the city and nothing else, because we could do that. Now Nick does that a lot. In fact, when we see the movie, which is, if you click on the movie image, at the Kickstarter, you see this cool little movie. Those are all Nick's illustrations, obviously, and they're all layered. So I can actually make little animations out of the different layers. And of course, once again, shouts out to the narrator. I did the narration. It was horrible. So I asked a friend of mine who happens to be Mark Meir, who is the voice of Commander Shepard, and to do after narration. He said yes, and he was very, very gracious. And I just hung out with Mark Meir and Leanna Vamp on a set for I was working on a script for a TV show, and I was in Barkerville for about 5 days. So I got to hang out with Mark Meir. So it was really cool that he did that narration for us. But that shows you the type of art style that Nick does. He produces very high resolution. I think this is 200 or 300 megabytes. So that shows you how big some of the artwork is. So when we did this with Amethyst, I think the final directory was, what was it, 10 or 12 gigabytes of artwork for Amethyst. And that was all the illustrations from Amethyst core book and factions. And it says, with an average size of 10 or 12 megabytes. And you'll see all the sketches, all the images we haven't used, all the images that Nick has processed. So it's a cool directory. And it's only an extra few dollars more. You get these giant images. What's cool, though, is that the directory is available now. We're offering as a free preview, something like that. Yeah, we're offering it as a free preview for people. And I think it's already a gigabyte in size, which is just crazy. So the whole point of this whole thread is that when Nick freaks out about doing a 50-inch illustration, I always remember, like, Nick, your images are already 50 inches across. So I mean, I could take the Last Supper image, and it would easily stretch over. Oh God, that would be amazing. If we did an Amethyst screen, that would just be it, wouldn't it? If we did a GM screen for Amethyst, we wouldn't need an original illustration. We would just do the Last Supper and just chop the top and bottom and just have the Last Supper go all the way across that, because that's your GM screen for Amethyst. So so with the Ultramodern one, yeah, it would be something that would be cool. We could either do a montage or just have a really cool image that just looks really good in that widescreen. So when it could be very possible that when we hit the pledge manager, that image won't be finalized. So we may just have a place marker for the GM screen. And of course, we're not going to know exactly the contents we're going to put in the GM screen until we finish Ultramodern itself. So even though the pledge manager is going to be up probably within the month or within a month, probably be sometime in July, we won't have a finalized image for the GM screen or what's going to look like the inside. And I do apologize for that, but the point is the fact that we have to get the main book out first. The variant cover, hopefully maybe we'll get the variant cover and we'll get that to a vote. And then we'll put the variant cover on Pledge Manager. So I think the priority for illustrations, Nick, is to work on some concepts for the alternate covers. I'd say 2 or 3 sketches, put it to a vote, see which ones are most popular, and then we'll throw that up for the alternate cover. And then we'll go on from there. But the GM screen, unfortunately, it may take a while to finalize that illustration. Okay, so we're way past the half-an-hour mark. I'm just going to wait a few minutes and see if there's any other final questions before we'll close it up. Like I said, we're doing pretty well. I'm going to be jacking up advertising for the campaign over the next little bit, and we'll hope to see. Thank you, Nick. You guys have seen some of the illustrations. Nick did some cool sketches for the alien setting that we're working on called Periphery. That one I'm looking forward to. I love stuff. As some of you guys may know, I do reviews for the Dice Tower, and I have one for Nemesis coming up, which is a really cool board game because I love that setting a lot. So that's something cool, and I may do something that's inspired by those. I can't remember if the Periphery is going to be based off of my Pathfinder game or whether or not it's going to be based off of Threat, because if you go to my homebrew website at StreamOfDawn.com, I have a whole bunch of homebrew games. There's actually one called Pathfinder. And I haven't changed the name because that Pathfinder is from 1994, I think. So that's give you an idea how long I've been role playing. I've been doing this a very, very long time. So I'm also, and this is kind of a final point here, I am really, really dedicated to getting this book out this year. So just something else people have asked, that if the Pledge Manager opens up and you purchase something like Neurospast or Apex, that doesn't get shipped out in November. You get that immediately. So those PDFs come out right away. And I also say note that when Ultramodern5's PDF gets finished and it gets finalized, that's getting sent out right away as well. So it won't be a situation where you guys have to wait. And so let's say if there's a delay in China, and we suddenly have an issue and the book doesn't arrive here in time and we can't make November. If the PDF is done by October, it's getting sent out, right? So you guys will have that book digitally. Most certainly you'll have the digital weeks, if not maybe in a month or two before you get the physical book in your hand. But even more so than that, you'll have access to all the rules months before then. So that construction system, if someone says this construction system is construction system is unbalanced, I'd be like, well, you guys had it for 2 months to test it, and that's kind of be the biggest thing, because I want to get these rules out. I want to get playtest rules out as soon as possible, because then I can spend 2 or 3 months testing it and getting feedback. Because that's the reason why we're doing Ultramodern, because we have 3 years of feedback on Ultramodern to make the basic Ultramodern look good. Well, but for the rules, for the mech construction and magic system, obviously we need a lot of feedback to make that work, because we want to make sure that everybody's happy, and that's kind of the important thing. So that's kind of the push. And so if the PDF comes out in November, and if the physical gets pushed back, as long as you guys get the digital as soon as possible, I think it's still a win on our part. But I also want to be able to continue, and I don't want to spend as long as I did on Amethyst Factions. Amethyst Factions took 4 years, and it was like 13 books. And I don't want to do that again. I'd rather make smaller projects and release books timely. So if Affinity does get unlocked, which would be obviously once we hit 60,000, then those will probably get released sometime the following year. My guess is probably the spring. These books are going to have some monsters, mostly setting stuff, a lot of cool illustrations from Nick, but those won't come out in November. It'd be impossible. Those will come out early next year. Once Neurospast is completely finished. Oh yeah, we'll get into that in a second here, Rodney. One of the things that I want to do is I want to be able to create these campaigns on a more regular basis. I want to be able to finish this one up, and I think most likely once the physical books go out, we may start up another campaign. So probably sometime early next year, we will start again with something new. So a comment on that one. So as people know, with Amethyst, Amethyst supports 5 systems. I mentioned them at length already. If Chris Stilson doesn't want to write for Fate or Savage World, then those 2 will go in the ether, because I'm ready for enough. 4th edition, 3rd edition, Pathfinder, 13th Age, they're very much related. So it's really easy to make those systems compatible. I love 13th Age, but the community is small, and they're beautiful and really friendly, but they're not big enough for sales, and it's an unfortunate truth. So if we do another Amethyst campaign, it'll probably be Pathfinder 5th edition, and then maybe Savage World and Fate Core if Chris wants to do them. If not, we'll probably be sticking with Pathfinder and 5th edition. I love 4th edition. 4th edition defined me, but it doesn't make the sales like it used to either. Like I said, Savage World and Fate do sell. They do pretty well, and Chris reaps the benefits of that. But for me, it's 5th edition, and Pathfinder would be my obligation. So if we do another Amethyst campaign, it'll be based on that. I mean, if the 13th Age fans come out in droves and say there's 500 of us that'll commit to buying your 13th Age, then maybe I'll do it. Oh, good question. So this has been a current conundrum right now. We made this, let's leave it with that, but because Savage World's coming out with the 2nd edition, and I think Chris, I can't remember the last conversation with Chris, is he dropping, if he's going to do the new version of Amethyst Factions for Savage World 2nd edition? I don't think so. I think he is releasing Amethyst Factions for the original Savage World, just because the original book was. And so the question is, if we do another Amethyst, will he be writing it for the 2nd edition or not? And that's going to be entirely up to him. Now, for Pathfinder 2nd edition, and there's also Starfinder as well, I'm making a note to try to avoid that, Starfinder, and sticking with Pathfinder. That's the tough one. I know that there's been some fan blowback to 2nd edition Pathfinder. I know that considering what they've promised, some people are looking like Pathfinder is starting to turn more into 5th edition. I don't have an opinion on that yet. I don't know how it's going to work. I think, once again, it'll depend on how different the rule system is, if it's a bunch of minor rule fixes. But there's also a part of me that realizes that if I make the next Amethyst book compatible to Pathfinder 2nd edition, I would have to re-release Amethyst Renaissance and Amethyst Factions for Pathfinder and re-release them back to Pathfinder 2nd edition. So by default, I think I would say that I would probably do the next Amethyst book for the original Pathfinder, and then maybe down the road adapt all 3 of those books to second edition. So if we manage to do another Amethyst sometime early next year, then it will probably be 5th edition old style Pathfinder, and then we'll go from there. I love 4th edition, but I don't think I can support 4th edition or 13th Age. And then, like I said, Fate and Savage World will be entirely on Chris. But yeah, no, I'm watching Pathfinder 2nd edition with trepidation, because I still don't see the rules. I'm not purchasing the playtest rules because I got more important things to deal with, and I will look at the rules when they gets released and I'll see if I like them. I'm sure they'll be fine, but I'm also going to check and see how popular they are. But I don't think people realize how popular 5th edition really is. Like I said, Ultramodern 4 did okay. Ultramodern 5 platinum in 3 months. So that's kind of where the market is, and that's why we decided. People have asked us if we were going to do Ultramodern 5 for 13th Age or Pathfinder, and I said no, because every single time I add a rule system, I add 6 months to the campaign, and that's just not going to happen. I can't afford to run a campaign for 2 or 3 years like I did last time. So yeah, if there's not any more questions, we will end it with there. Any final words you want to share with us, Nick? Yeah, I know. I should stick with one system, and if I would stick with one system, it would be 5th edition. 5th edition is just it's dominated the landscape in a way that only reminiscent to the original 3rd edition. When 3rd edition took over the landscape, that was just very dramatic. So I like writing for 5th edition. I like writing for 4th ed. I love writing 4th edition, but unfortunately, it's just the writing's on the wall for that one. Well, I know you're saying you're looking forward to getting started on all this, Nick, but trust me, you'll probably hate me by July. So yeah, there's a lot of illustrations. There's a big illustration budget now because we're still at 736 at 54,517. So, and I'm hoping by this time tomorrow we'll be at 55. The art budget's going to be pretty high. I already have a list of the illustrations that we're going to need, and the other part is giving Nick a lot more freedom to create the illustrations that he wants, to have fun. Because when you're dealing with the monsters and some of the other mecha, the real challenge, and this is the point I keep on mentioning to Nick, like when we are trying these other genres, we also have to try the different styles, and this is going to be the real challenge because Nick has got a fantastic style. When we were working on Neurospasta, we had to work together and try to create. That's my secret because I always hate you. When we were making the mecha, we were having issues trying to get the robots to look right. And I told Nick to draw them as if he was drawing creatures. And that's when he created this fantastic visual aesthetic of having the mechs look very almost organic looking. So they became more like living creatures. And I think that was kind of the secret. But going into Ultramodern, we have to change styles a little bit. So we'll have a mech that looks like a giant organic machine, and we'll have another mech that looks like it's right out of 5-star stories. And I say 5-star stories is a deep cut because I actually have 5-star. You can just see it right there. I used to build mech models. I don't have very many left, but there's some from Front Mission in the front. There's some Gundam, and somewhere back there is a Front Mission. Is a 5-star story mech, and that's gonna be the hardest thing because I've sent Nick illustrations of some of these anime mecha, and I'm like, you got to tackle that. He designed a giant robot image that you can see in our campaign, which is that beautiful mech in the background. It reminds me kind of those Iron Punk or Diesel Punk mech image where they would paint mecha in those old Soviet photos, right? Yeah, like piston diesel looking mechs. I freaking love those, and I know that Nick's probably gonna love getting these clunky little machines and so forth. But then it was like, okay, you drew that. But now you got to draw the big anime mecha with it looks like the big samurai armor with the big swords. And you got to, I'm actually looking forward to seeing Nick try to interpret an anime mecha through his lens. And I think that one's going to stress him out more than anything because now it's like, oh, no, you've drawn your mecha. You've drawn the mecha you want to draw. Now you got to draw the giant kaiju samurai. Yeah, the good old-fashioned Gundam superhero mech. I'd like to have a powered armor that's like I can't remember the names of them. The Cyclones from Robotech, the Invid Invasion. I want to get those. I want to get like a classic Veritech. Can't pull it. Yeah, you are. I want to get a good old Veritech that's like a transforming fighter. I want to play on the get something from Evangelion. I'm not a huge fan of Evangelion, but the designs are very, very evocative. Something that's taken out of Pacific Rim, those giant things, right? I want to have the 5-star story ones, and 5-star stories are just basically extravagant, giant 80-foot tall samurais with huge cowls and massive swords and massive guns and a lot of unnecessary bling. Just flare everywhere. You know, glistening gold-plated machines, and then go with the industrial front mission type where the mechs are quite literally like they're swapping parts here and there, and they got rail guns and so forth. You must include the Cyclone in Ultramodern 5. Yeah. The Elton John. Yeah, exactly. The Elton John of mechs. That's the right mindset. Trust me, I've been collecting images. I've been sitting Nick a lot, and I'm sure you can freak out. But yeah, I want to show off all of those designs. So I want people to be able to create everything that they want. I want to have an image of like that 5-star story, beautiful little design, and I want to have that Cyclone, that transforming. We're going to have something transforming. I don't care if it's a car, a powered armor car, or powered armor bike. I look at the Cyclone, but of course, oddly enough, the images I sent in Nick weren't from Cyclones. They're from Bubblegum Crisis, and that was the hard suits. But there's a hard suit where the bike detaches and attaches to the hard suit and makes her this much larger power armor. I love those, and so I want to play with some of those concepts as well. I also like the A-shape for that. I'm like, yeah, those are neat. I'm thinking we'll probably include Most PETA. There we go. I know what it is. Most PETA, and the second one was Southern Cross and then Macross for the classic Robotech. Trust me, I know Robotech quite well. And I love the Cyclones and Most PETA. I love the Alpha Fighters too. I was a big fan of the Beta Fighter, which is this fighter that attaches to the back of the Alpha. Those were kind of my favorite, but I was a big fan of the big, heavy industrial mechs. I love the Mach 3 from Robotech, which is that giant city block with legs that would just walk with those big guns. And those are all ideas that I would love to dance around. Of course, like how much damage does a Mach 3 gun do? And that's going to be a situation where it's like, in my opinion, it's like 2x4, like 3x4 times 10 or 3x4 times 20. It's just like, if you're even touching, it doesn't even come close to hitting you, you're basically dead. But it's kind of one of those things where 3 or 4 shots can kill a 18th level, 17th level creature. Just pow, and then that's it. I'm getting excited thinking about it. But okay, but anyway, yeah, those are just some of the ideas, because I think people loved back in the old days. All right, man. I know we're having store here warnings as well. There has been very much a desire to go back. People when they were young, I don't know if you guys do anymore, love making characters, just sitting around making characters. But when I was young, we would just sit there making mechs. We would just sit there making mechs over and over. I love being a GM because I got to make way more mechs than anyone else did. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. I want to be able to create a system where I'm like, ooh, and that's how we did Apex. That's why Apex feat system. There's like 700 feats in Apex with all these tiers, because I kept on thinking, ooh, let's do this. Ooh, let's do this. Ooh, let's do this. And I want to do that with Mecha as well. All right, so now we're now past 90-minute mark, I think, and there's no more questions. We will conclude. Hopefully, this campaign will do well. I'm glad everyone was showing up to say hi, and thank you for those guys for watching. Obviously, this will go online. We'll post it to the as an update probably in the next day or two, and people can see me ramble on for 90 minutes. So if there's no one else, I will say goodbye, and thank you for everything that's happened. Obviously, this has been fantastic. 736 backers, $55,000 Canadian. This has been a fantastic experience. I'm overjoyed. I'm so glad that I have a very, very dedicated, loyal fan community. I love you guys. I think you guys are fantastic. I love the support that you guys have thrown me. And I'm glad that I'm able to do this because I get to write full time, and this is fantastic. And that means I hopefully I can bring this product and justify your guys' confidence in me, and both of us, and me and Nick. I'm sure Nick is also incredibly happy at what everything that's happened. But for me, it means that maybe we can move out of this basement suite and into a house. But anyway, guys, I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next update. Oh, I have to say goodbye here to show you. He says goodbye.